by other things. But they have in fact just completed another report on truancy in primary schools and creative partnerships, and they've actually come up with education significant differences, in that there is a dramatic reduction which increases over time in creative partnerships programs impact on truancy compared with all other primary schools in the country. And that is because our resources are deployed at the teacher in the classroom to help them develop the skill to really make a difference. And I think we should be driven by that evidence to support the work that actually delivers those outcomes.
Thank you. Bruce, is this the end of BSF, and can a school really deliver in the heart of the community?
Well, all I can say is that I hope it's not the end of BSF, because as I said at the start, it's not an option to replace these buildings. Yes, you're right, they don't necessarily, the buildings that are there don't necessarily have to be replaced by glass palaces designed by Norman Foster and Richard Rogers, and it was an unfortunate cul-de-sac that a proportion of the early academies were built by those signature architects. You can't get away from the fact that they're beautiful buildings as well. The buildings that are being replaced are mostly life expired. The other critical factor is that they were poorly specified in the first place. They're cheap, nasty buildings that were thrown up around the raising of the school leaving age in the early 70s. Most of them have got classrooms that are 35, 40 square metres, no storage, corridors that lead to bad behaviour, toilets that you wouldn't want your cat to go into. It's not an option to say, should we have building schools for the future, whatever we call it. It is pie in the sky, I accept, to assume that you can automatically get transformational education on the back of a building. As I said at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily follow, but there's nothing wrong with the aspiration, and I think any government would be wrong to lose sight of that.
Excellent, we have time for two more questions. So, gentleman here and gentleman right here, please. Sorry about everyone else.
Thanks very much.
Fire away.
My question is there anything wrong with education for profit? And while you're thinking about that, can I say that I'm one of those rare breeds. I'm a counsellor in Michael Gove's constituency. I am headmaster of a family-owned preparatory school where not even a charitable trust, and we're judged by the taxman as being educating for profit. So we pay taxes. We're very well supported by our parents. I could show you wonderful classrooms which are in converted stables, log cabins in the gardens. If I wanted a workforce to help me over a weekend to clear some grounds or to paint a classroom, I know I would get plenty of volunteers. Interestingly enough, on IT, yes, we've got very whizzy IT, but our children, when they go off for a day in a reenacted Victorian school, come back really enthused. And why? Because they say, well, they really, really learned things. And I've determined that in every classroom we're going to put back a blackboard, because I really do believe that independent schools and state schools, we've all gone along with it. We've thrown huge amounts of money at IT. Thank you.
Just one question. Yes, great. Thank you. And the gentleman here. Thank you.
I just think that building schools for the future has been slightly flawed, and sort of comes about your opinions on it. And the fact that I work one day a week at an academy over in Salford. We're still in the original Victorian buildings of the high school, and so at the moment all that's happened is it's changed its name. And I end up teaching in a classroom that's full of brand new computers, sat directly beneath the leaking roof. There's prism bars on the windows, and you know, they're saying, you know, they say, oh, we've got all this fantastic ICT, but surely you basically get the impression that they said, well, your new building will come, they haven't even started building it yet, but here's your computers, now shut up and be quiet. You know, and all around us, the facilities are falling apart. Surely there should be some money there to still provide you with your basic teaching needs in the interim period.
Okay. Anna, could you pick up please? Education for profit.
I'm not going to answer your question. I'm also not disobeying the chair, but just to say that sounds horrible. Education for profit. No, I don't think there is any reason not to allow profit-making schools. It's obviously an extremely dicey area for politicians to get into, so I can kind of see why they're dodging it. Profit actually allows schools to invest in success and to scale up. I think there probably is going to be a big issue with not allowing profit-making organisations into the system. If you want a lot of new organisations to come into the system, I think eventually we're going to have to bite the bullet.
Paul? Leaving the streaming side apart, my feeling is that the evidence suggests that mixed schools, where people from different backgrounds and different abilities are educated together, produce the best overall result for everybody. And my only concern with education profit, if you look at a county like Kent, and we have quite a lot of the schools in Kent, is there's a very high level of children in private education as the right of their parents. You've then got grammar schools, and you're then left with secondary schools where everybody who wanted to get educated actually went somewhere else, and an incredibly pressurised environment on the head teachers to try and turn those into high achieving schools. Now the schools we work with are high achieving schools, having ended up with the people they really wanted to educate, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. I think their job is harder because so many students are creamed off. The culture of the school is very hard.
The education for profit. I suppose the commitment would appear to be not to allow education for profit. And many people may have seen the article by one of the architects of the Swedish Free Schools project, in which he said, without that you are not going to have the mechanisms by which you can duplicate success. But I guess politically we've got to go a step at a time, in the humility I think. So one hopes that one does do this, and going back to BSF and the future of BSF, because what we're going to do is set aside money from BSF so that communities can, I think of the neighbouring city of Hull to my constituency, where property prices, as it happens, fortunately, are relatively low. The opportunity there for the parents, those who have let them down over generations, they whisper that it's the people in Hull. They're not really interested. It's their fault. It's not the people who run the system. It's the people of Hull who lack ambition. And what and that's the kind of sotto voce voice that comes through. And what anyone who read the Swedish Guide article the other day, he said they were taken aback by how, in fact, parents in areas where they thought they lacked initiative, they lacked the drive, had in fact given the opportunity, seized it and ran with it. So I want to see new schools, not necessarily glamorous new ones, but most of them for empowered schools where communities and parents are able to get the education they want, provide the opportunity for their kids. And I think, finally answering the question, I think having seen that revolution coming, that we will bite the bullet, as Anna calls it, and where there will be demand from the most unlikely places to say we want for-profit schools, because we've seen what community freedom to set up new schools and expand can do for people like us.
Bruce?
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I find the dance that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are doing with the Swedish system absolutely fascinating, given that the idea of making a profit out of it is absolutely at the heart of it, and yet no one brings that to the fore. I just think it's an idea that needs to be given a trial. Who is going to have the profit made out of them? Is it the parents? Is it the local authority? Is it the government? Is it the taxpayers? These ideas are really not being thoroughly looked at, and I think it's an idea that needs to have its day in a small pilot. Let's bring it on.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I think that brings it to an end. I'd like to thank Policy Exchange for hosting this, and thank Creativity, Culture and Education for sponsoring this, and thank you for all coming. Thank you very much. Cheers.